Hello, everyone. Good morning. How's it going? Day two, all strong? Awesome. Let's get started.
Fantastic. Welcome. We're going to be talking about how to accelerate your Data 360 with some 5 pro tips. And
before we get started, forward-looking statement as usual. Please make sure you make the purchasing decisions based on the products that are available today. Moving ahead, thank you again for joining us, and I hope you're having a great TDX. With that, I'm Akshata Savan, developer advocate at Salesforce, based in London, and excited to be here with you all again with Steve Simpson.
hello, my name is Steve Simpson. I'm a Salesforce certified technical architect. I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem for about 20 years. I've been teaching in the Trailhead, and it was about 8 years teaching in the Trailhead. And about 3.5 years ago, they said, we need a Data Cloud instructor. Learn Data Cloud and start teaching Data Cloud. So that was about 3.5 years ago. So I've dove deep into Data Cloud. And then now in my role at Capato, I've been focusing on how to deploy Data Cloud, take it from not prod to non-prod. So I'm going to be sharing with you a lot of my deep knowledge in with Data 360.
Wow, that's interesting. Moving ahead, here's the agenda for today's session. It's pretty simple. As discussed, as mentioned previously, we are going to dive into the 5 tips from a developer perspective, what's required for you to accelerate with Data 360. So, and then we'll have a recap, resources, and everything you need to know. Moving ahead, over to you.
Now, somebody's instinct with a data warehouse is put everything you have into the data warehouse. That can be problematic, but Data 360, you find yourself bringing in a DSO, and we use a lot of 3-letter acronyms here. Bring in your data through a DSO, in through a DLO, and then you map it to a DMO, and you go, that should have been a text field instead of numeric. Then you realize you got to remove the DMO, remove the DLO. You got to unravel it all. So you find that it's better to really map things out first. And don't just stick everything in. You want to put data into Data 360 intentionally. So choose what goes in there.
So Data 360, as you know, formerly known as Data Cloud, it's a Salesforce's data native engine that helps you get your data into Salesforce without you having to move your data from anywhere where it's currently residing with the zero copy. And there are so many more other functionalities. So basically, the Salesforce is the only data native engine that will help you get started with your data right within the platform where your customer engagement starts. With Data 360, you can actually you can get real-time insights, you can have different flows built, you can have your processes streamlined, and you can also have your agents fueled with data. So definitely all of these things are possible, but for this to possible, let's look into a deep dive into the architecture.
Perfect. So what is Data 360? I've been teaching Data Architect for a number of years, and you try to put lots of data in Salesforce Core. One, it can be expensive. It's a transactional. It can hit data volumes. You're like, what are these things called big objects? They weren't the best thing to put things in. Then you're like, well, I'm going to put my data off platform. Then how do I access it on core? And so what we have here is a diagram I put together. What we have is you may have your home org. We'll talk about that a little later. And then you have multiple prod orgs, companion orgs. Your North America, your EMEA. You might have if you sell software, hardware. For whatever reason, you might have multiple production orgs. They feed into the Data Cloud tenant. I'm using a different word here. And you can also feed in B2C and Marketing Cloud. And then we could be pulling in from these external systems, S3, Redshift, BigQuery, but they start at the left through a bunch of 3-letter acronyms. First, they come in through the DSOs, through connectors. Then they turn into DLOs because you can add an extra field, where you can add things for the keys. We'll talk about that in one of the tips.
Yep.
But then you map it to your DMOs. DMOs are your standard Salesforce objects, and you can add your own, but there are over 1,000 out-of-the-box DMOs in there now. I know that because I've been watching over the last 3 years. There were like a couple hundred, and then a week later, more showed up and more showed up. What's been happening is all the verticals, all the clouds industries have been mapping themselves into the DMOs. So there's over 1,000 DMOs, and you can add, just like Salesforce Core, you can add custom fields, custom DMOs. Then you want to do something with the data. You could create data actions and transforms and even enrichments to push some of that back up to your core orgs. You can be then making it available to your S3s and BigQueries. Then there's this crazy word called zero copy. What that means is I can take data in my Redshift and act on it without actually copying it to Data 360. But then there's the reverse zero copy where I can take Data 360 data, make it visible out to my other warehouses. So it's this crazy circular inception-like concepts. But this is the power. It flows in to the tenant, not core. Flows in, moves through, and then goes out with your actionable steps.
So without any further delay, let's dive right into the tips, starting with the tip number 1, which we both think is the most important one. Know your credits even before you start building. So even before you start building a flow, or it could be any processes or anything but Data 360, first know your credit consumptions. Because if you have a streaming CI that is processing millions of records, you won't be able to know about it or get to know about it in your console. You will know about it in your next bill or your next invoices. Okay? So there is one thing that no one tells you about Data 360. That is credit consumption, because it's not visible anywhere. So first, you need to know about credit consumption, how it actually works. If you're processing millions of records, okay, sorry, I would say if you're processing hundreds of records, but in order to get those records, 100 records, you need to operate, you need to scan those records, and the engine has to scan, join, perform some operations. And these operations could be scanning through millions of records. Then you will be actually paying for those millions records and not the 100 records that you requested for. So when it comes to Data 360, you are actually paying for the records that are processed and not the records that are returned. Okay? So in order to get started, you need to know the process, the flows that you are building. So if in case of example, you're like, we have 3 dockets, which are actually the 3 phases. So you could be connecting data, which means that you are ingesting data from different sources. So how often are you ingesting this data? Or maybe how often are you copying the data into the system or sending it out? Secondly, how often are you harmonizing the data? How complex are your transformations? How difficult are your queries, or how complex are your queries? Third, how do you activate your data more often? How often are you sending your data to the marketing teams? So one mistake or one unoptimized query in the first step will act as a multiplier that will cost you the credit consumption. So it's quite important to have all the queries, all the processes very much optimized, and also for you to have a check on your credit consumption. So how do you fix all this credit consumption issue? How do you get a proper insight about your credit consumptions, the credits that you have used? The solution here would be digital wallet. With digital wallet, you can refresh your data it actually refreshes your data every 4 hours. You get an insight about the credits that you have used, the credits that you're about to use. And the best part, you can actually set limits. Like if you want to set a threshold limit of 50%, 75%, or 80%, for which you will be notified that, okay, you have consumed this much amount of limit and now you should slow down. Or if there is a process that is consuming large number of credits or extreme credits. Okay, so digital wallet will help you keep a track on your credit consumption, because our aim here is to build sustainably and to build with responsibility, right? You want to add something, Steve?
And
yeah.
People are like, why do I have to deal with credits? This isn't cool. We've lived in a sheltered world in Salesforce. So we've sold 200 Sales Cloud, 400 Service Cloud, certain community licenses. We fixed the cost for like a 3-year term, and then we could build all we wanted. It might run fast, it might run slow, but we never worried about a bill showing up in the 3 months in that was high. Yeah. The AWS world and the rest of the world lives with monthly bills and inefficient processes that can spike. So we are now moving to having to deal with consumption-based, and you can manage it. Know what you're building, get predictable costs, watch for the spikes. This is just part of the real world. We're coming out of that sheltered space and moving into the consumption world, which, as I said, the rest of the world has been living in.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's go into, I got it. Data modeling is everything. As I said, don't bring everything in, and don't take the original data structures how your data is. Don't take this file from S3 or this feed from somewhere and just say, bring it straight into Data 360. Look at it. Intentionally understand its structure. And what we want you to do is that structure determines the identity, segmentation, performance. Look, you're going to be looking at how it's structured. What is the data? What are the contents? You want to use the standard DMOs, data model objects, very carefully. They're your final end state of your data. So you want to understand the source, how to get it to that end state. You want to be thinking about how much you are using those objects properly. If you're modeling them correctly, you might even need to get into some data modeling. I usually teach the data architect class, and you'll learn a little bit about what's called data normalization, how to find the keys, how to map things in. You want to bring the data in intentionally, because once you bring it in, your DSOs lead to DLOs, lead to DMOs, and then everything cascades. And if you go, oh, I wish I had flattened that. I wish I had pivoted that. I wish I had turned this to a larger text area or something. It can be harder later. You end up having to leave the old things, create new ones, and you end up like field twos. I don't know, like product two objects. You know, you start to get messed up. You start to get these hacks because you don't want to unravel everything. So data modeling is everything. Okay, next, keys define the reality. When you have a big table of data, what makes each record individual? How can I find that record and that record only? What's its primary key? Is it what's called a foreign key? Is it ID by never Social Security, but like customer ID? But what if could there be two with the same keys? Understand your keys. And what we're going to say is if you don't, you might get a big initial load that goes well, but what happens when they send you a new file with the same records? What if you don't see them as the same and you double load? What if they send you 10,000 new ones and 3 updated old ones? Will you be updating the correct records? When you bring in a second feed from a completely different data source, but the same data, are you matching them properly? Are you matching them with your data loads? Are you matching them with your identity resolution? So keys define the reality. Understand your primary keys, your foreign keys, and your compound keys for matching. So this is a very important concept.
Absolutely. Moving ahead, the tip number 4, which is connecting any system with your robust API. So Data Cloud isn't meant to be a silo. I mean, you're actually talking about all these different data sources from where you can get your data with zero copy and all the different methodologies. So in order to make the most of this, in order to get your data into the Data Cloud, Data 360, and start processing, the main use here is, you can make the most of your APIs while you're doing these things. And you have several options available for this. Firstly, to start with streaming ingestion API, bulk ingestion API, or the query API. With streaming API, you can actually process the data at the real time. And for the newest update that we're getting by summer 25, which says that you can also have a partial update, which means that if you do not have to get the entire data, I mean, if there is a small change, you can just get in the primary key and the change record, and not the whole data, or the whole entire row or the entire record. So that's actually saving you a lot of records that you're getting. Again, you're saving on the credits. Next would be bulk injection API, where you're actually getting a large number of data in batches. And thirdly, the query API, where you can act as a simple SQL queries and you can get your data inside. So depending on the use case, you can choose which API or which API exactly you want to use. And the pro tip here would be to follow a proper sequence, because again, bringing back to the point number 1, you have to be mindful of your credit consumption. So if you follow a sequence where you're first triggering an identity resolution rule, then segmentation, and then building your CI, it's going to give you a proper output. Okay? And of course, there are other capabilities as well which you can make most of, including the data graph and the write-back platform events. Also, zero copy, as Steve mentioned. So you can get your data in, or you can use your data basically where it is. So you do not have to build all those complex, brittle pipelines. Your data resides wherever it is, and you can just operate on it. You can operate it to and fro. Right?
All right, so going back to this diagram, as we talk about inputs, you're either feeding data into the connectors, into your tenant. You're feeding into the tenant, not your core, and then that can come from push or pull. Push meaning you're pushing the data in. You could be using MuleSoft. You could be pushing into the API. You could be calling the bulk data load API. You could push 1 million records at night, every hour. You could push thousands of records on a constant stream every second. So that's the push mechanism. The pull mechanism, it can be set up with a schedule where it can reach out to your S3 buckets, grab files. So Data 360 can actually reach out and pull your data where it sits. So you have push, pull at the left side. Now the data moves through, it hits your data actions, and it goes into your orgs through things like platform events. You can even have a Data 360 platform event hitting your core org. You have these new things called enrichments, where it can actually push the data into your S objects at the core. And then down below, we can be virtualizing our data going out. We can be doing some data actions to endpoints where we can do things like callback mechanisms. And then down at the bottom, they can be querying into the query API that we talked about. So there's a lot of you need to be knowing, is it at the left side of the process feeding in, or is it at the right side of the process coming out? Test at scale. And so you want to know, is it going to work? And this I was in the Salesforce Tower on Tuesday with a bunch of architects doing the whole well-architected program walkthrough. It's wonderful. But one of the factors is cost. We now live in a world of architects where cost is now a factor. We've been sheltered. We didn't know it. We've heard about those AWS overruns and their big bills, but we've been sheltered. Now the world is coming with AI credits and Data 360 credits. So you need to be testing at real volumes. So you need realistic data volumes in a non-production environment, and you need to be running load tests, speed tests, and cost tests. How do you run a cost test? You grab an isolated environment, you take realistic data sets, and then you hit your stopwatch, you hit your your pricing calculator, your wallet, and then you zero it out, find a way to take a metric, run your test, see what the metrics were, and know if on my hourly process, it's going to consume a little bit of credits. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and in the summertime, our electric bills are easily over $500 per month. 500 can go to 1,000 if you're not watching out. So you can bet it's now spring. I'm watching my electric bill every day by the hour. Is this running? Is this running? How much does the AC cost? So I can bring it down. I am actively doing that to prepare for summer. This is the exact analogy you guys are going to be doing. You're going to have your Data 360 and you're going to be like, I'm loading 1 million files. It only costs 10 credits. I'm going to space it out. I'm well within my budgeted amount. And all is good. But if somebody has a great idea, let's bring in this 10 million record file. And a few records change every morning. Let's just reload the whole file. Let's just take all 10 million and let's do it hourly. Reload a 10 million file that barely changes, and you're going to do it hourly. That's going to cause potentially a spike. So you might say, can we find the deltas and only load the deltas? So you might actually do things a little differently, knowing that cost could be a factor. And so you need to run your tests, monitor, do your ingestion, track your credit usage. So do it intentionally, and you can keep your electric bill, your Data 360 bill, all under control.
So true. So as you know, like all the points, if you have seen all the 5 points, they're actually interconnected. Like Steve spoke about the test at scale, which is actually interconnected to the first one. So let's go through all the 5 tips one by one. Firstly, know your credit consumption really well before you build it. Start using digital wallet or get to know more about your consumption. Make your queries more optimized and the solution more optimized. Keep a track of credit consumption. And then you'll have to keep a close eye on the data model that you're using, the keys that you're defining, the primary keys, or the keychain that you're building using all the information that you're getting in, right? The next one, like connecting your information, like making the most of the APIs to get your data from external systems inside Data 360 or with zero copy. The last one, as Steve mentioned, testing at scale. So make sure you're testing everything optimally.
Perfect. Well, I hope this was helpful. We both hope this is helpful. There's some resources here.
Yeah.
Do you have the resource links, or they're on the community?
We have hosted them on the Trailhead community portal. We'll add more resources to the same link. And thank you again for joining us. Thanks for being here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the TDX and have a safe flight back home.